She came looking for a housekeeping job, but what she found was a billionaire, a forbidden past, and a love that could cost him everything. Elena Moore was just trying to survive, but when Damian Blackwell opened the door, their lives were set on a collision course with secrets, betrayal, and an impossible choice. Will she walk away or fight for a future neither of them expected? You won't believe how this emotional roller coaster ends. Where in the world are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. Elena Moore stood at the edge of the iron gates, her heart hammering like a drum in her chest. The Blackwell estate loomed beyond the sprawling driveway, like a castle carved out of old money and older secrets. She tightened her grip on the thin folder in her hands, her resume freshly printed at the public library that morning, and took a deep breath. This wasn't just another interview. This was her last chance. With rent past due and her younger brother Sophie running out of excuses for missing tuition payments, Elena was running on hope and desperation. She had applied to dozens of positions in the past month, but this housekeeping job could mean stability, maybe even a future. As she stepped onto the gravel path, her scuffed black heels sank slightly into the stones, clicking with uneven rhythm as she approached the front door. Her blouse clung to her skin in the late summer heat, and her worn blazer did little to hide the frayed seams. Still, she kept her chin high. She was used to wearing armor stitched together from pride and survival. The door opened before she could even knock. A tall man stood in the threshold, his silhouette framed by the sun-drenched foyer behind him. He was striking. Sharp cheekbones, dark hair touched with silver at the temples, and a gaze so intense it made her breath catch. He looked at her as if he'd been expecting her all his life. "You're early," he said, voice low and rough, like it had been scraped against stone. Elena blinked, confused. I thought the interview was at 11? "It doesn't matter," he murmured, stepping aside. "Come in." Something about the way he spoke made her legs move before her mind could catch up. The interior of the estate was breathtaking, vaulted ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and artwork that belonged in a museum. But there was something else too, a silence that felt too deliberate, too empty. The kind of silence that held memories behind its walls. "I'm Elena Moore," she said, forcing a smile and holding out her hand. "I'm here about the housekeeping position." The man hesitated, then gave a small nod, ignoring her outstretched hand. Damian Blackwell. The name hit her like a jolt. She had seen it in the news before, whispered in the margins of glossy magazines and tragic headlines. Damian Blackwell, the billionaire recluse. The man whose wife had died under mysterious circumstances 3 years ago. The heir to the Blackwell hotel empire who had all but vanished from public life. "Oh," she breathed. "Mr. Blackwell, Let's sit," he interrupted, already leading her into a sunlit sitting room that overlooked a garden so perfectly trimmed it could have been painted. Before she could collect her thoughts, a housekeeper appeared with a silver tray, nodding silently as she set down delicate china cups and a steaming pot of tea. "Thank you, Mrs. Holloway," Damian said with a nod. She disappeared as quickly as she had arrived. "I don't care why you're here," Damian said abruptly, meeting Elena's eyes with a look that was almost pleading. "Just don't leave, not yet." Her throat tightened. "Mr. Blackwell, I think there's been some confusion. I'm not." "The position," he cut in, pouring tea with steady hands. "Yes, of course." She accepted the cup, her fingers brushing his. His hand trembled, barely noticeable, but it was there. For someone who supposedly ruled an empire, he looked tired, haunted. "You're not what I expected," he said softly, watching her over the rim of his cup. "I get that a lot." He laughed, short and surprised, like it had been a long time since anything had amused him. "Tell me about you," he said. "Not your qualifications, you." Elena hesitated, unsure of what kind of interview this was turning into. But something about his voice, the weary hope in it, made her speak. "I'm from Rock Hollow. Small town 2 hours north. Moved to the city 8 years ago. My parents passed young, so I raised my brother. He's in college now. I'm here because I need this job. I'm good at bringing order to things. And I don't have the luxury of saying no." Damian leaned back, studying her like she was a puzzle he'd been waiting to solve. "Order," he said quietly. "That's rare." Elena gave a small shrug. "When everything else is chaos, Clean counters and folded sheets start to feel like power. He laughed again, this time longer. I think I like you, Miss Moore. And Alina, despite every instinct telling her something was off, couldn't help but wonder if she had just stepped into something far more complicated than a housekeeping job. That night, Alina wandered the halls of the Blackwell estate in silence, trying to shake off the strange sense of disorientation that clung to her like mist. The house was massive, a labyrinth of polished wood and antique rugs, with paintings of unsmiling ancestors watching her from the walls. Every footstep echoed longer than it should have. The east wing remained dark and locked, and Mrs. Holloway had simply said, "It's unused. Best to leave it be." But something about that hallway made the hairs on the back of Elena's neck prickle. She thought she heard a piano playing faintly, a delicate waltz drifting through the air. But when she followed the sound, the music stopped, and the piano room was empty, its cover closed, untouched. Her guest room was far too luxurious for someone meant to scrub baseboards. The sheets were Egyptian cotton, the tub large enough to swim in, but comfort didn't calm the feeling in her gut. Something about the way Damien looked at her over dinner, like he was trying to see someone else in her face, unsettled her. He hadn't spoken much after their tea earlier, just invited her to stay the night, then vanished into a study and closed the doors behind him. The next morning, Elena woke to birdsong and filtered light through heavy curtains. Her own clothes had been taken, replaced by a neatly pressed blue blouse and dark slacks that somehow fit perfectly. When she questioned the maid, the woman smiled stiffly. From the guest wardrobe, Mrs. Holloway selected them. She said it was more appropriate. Elena dressed reluctantly, wondering how they knew her size. As she descended the grand staircase, the scent of coffee and something buttery drifted through the air. Damien was waiting in the breakfast room, a book in his hand and a mug in front of him, untouched. "You slept well, I hope," he said without looking up. As well as someone can in a stranger's mansion with linen sheets and unanswered questions. That made him smile. "You're honest. I like that." She sat across from him, determined to get answers. "Why me, Damien? Why offer me the position after so much confusion?" He closed the book, folding his hands. "Because I mistook you for someone else, and I was relieved when I did." She frowned. "You were expecting your arranged fiancé, weren't you?" He nodded slowly. "Cassandra Devereux? Our families made an agreement years ago. Marriage by the age of 45, or I lose control of the company." Elena blinked. "That's ridiculous." "Tell that to the board of Blackwell Holdings," he said with a bitter edge. "They cling to tradition like it's the only thing holding the walls up. And you were just going to marry this woman? For the business?" "I wasn't going to fight anymore," he admitted. "Not after Madeline." The name dropped like a stone into the room. Elena recognized it instantly. Madeleine Blackwell, the late wife. The woman who had fallen, or perhaps jumped, from the balcony of their penthouse apartment 3 years ago. The media had speculated endlessly, but nothing was ever confirmed. "What happened to her?" Elena asked softly. He looked away. "An accident, that's what the reports say." "And what do you say?" "I say she died before she hit the ground. She died the day she realized she married the name, not the man." Elena let the silence stretch. There were things in his voice that no amount of wealth could cover up. Regret, loneliness, guilt. She saw it now. He wasn't just hiding from the public. He was hiding from himself. He stood then, suddenly restless. "Come. I want to show you something." He led her outside, past the greenhouse and into the far end of the garden. They walked in silence, the only sound the crunch of gravel underfoot and the rustling of wind in the trees. At the edge of the property was a narrow path that curved toward a forgotten orchard. Damien stopped there. "This was hers," he said. "Madeline's favorite spot. She used to paint here." Elena knelt near a broken stone bench, running her fingers over the initials carved in the wood post beside it. "MB. There's still so much of her in this place," he whispered, "and yet it's all falling apart." When she stood and turned toward him, he looked at her, not like she was someone he needed to replace Madeline, but like she was the first thing in years that didn't remind him of her. "I don't know what's happening here," Elena said quietly. "But it's not a job anymore, is it?" Damien's eyes met hers. "No, it never was." The ballroom shimmered beneath chandeliers that looked like they'd been plucked from Versailles. Polished marble gleamed under the feet of Boston's elite, and laughter floated through the air like perfume. Elena stood near the edge of the room, hidden behind a potted fig tree, her breath caught in her throat. She wore a borrowed gown, black and elegant, her hair swept into a soft knot by one of the maids. A simple mask covered the top half of her face, damask and satin, with delicate gold embroidery. She hadn't planned to attend the masquerade. It was meant to be a formal welcome for Cassandra Devereux, the woman Damien's family expected him to marry. But Mrs. Holloway had left the dress hanging in her room with a single note: "You belong here more than most of them." She didn't, of course. She was the housekeeper, the girl from nowhere with a brother to feed and a mountain of unpaid bills. Still, she watched from the shadows as the guests mingled and glasses clinked. She was supposed to be serving, not staring, but something made her linger. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was foolishness, or maybe it was him. Damien stood across the room, dressed in a charcoal suit that seemed tailored by gods, not men. His mask was simple, black, like the secrets he wore like armor. He hadn't noticed her yet, or so she thought. But as a waltz began to play and couples turned to the floor, his eyes suddenly found hers through the crowd. The connection was instant, magnetic, and terrifying. He crossed the room without hesitation, weaving through politicians, old money matrons, and the curious stares of those who still whispered about the mysterious recluse. When he reached her, he extended a hand. "May I?" Her voice caught. "You don't even know who I am." "I think I do," he said. "I think I've known since the moment you knocked on my door." She placed her hand in his, and they moved to the dance floor as if it had been choreographed long before this night. Around them, eyes followed. Whispers rose. But in that moment, Elena heard none of it, just the music, just his heartbeat beneath the brush of her fingers. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered as they danced. "This is her night, Cassandra's." His jaw clenched slightly. "You're the only person here who feels real." They moved like shadows, the lights catching on her dress and his cufflinks, two ghosts colliding under chandeliers. But the spell broke when a soft, refined voice spoke beside them. "Graham." Cassandra stood at the edge of the dance floor, her icy blue gown clinging to her like it had been sculpted from frozen silk. She was stunning, tall, poised, and every inch the heiress her family had raised her to be. Her mask sparkled like diamonds, but her eyes were sharp behind it. "You didn't tell me the housekeeper would be attending," she said smoothly, her gaze landing on Elena like a scalpel. Elena stepped back instantly, her cheeks burning. Damien didn't move. "I didn't think it was your concern who I choose to spend time with." Cassandra smiled, but it was hollow. "Everything in this house is my concern, or haven't you told her yet?" Elena looked between them. "Told me what?" Vivian appeared before anyone could answer, her voice crisp. "That Cassandra is not just a guest. She is the future of this family. That's what." Damien's expression darkened. "You don't get to dictate my future anymore, Mother." "You're out of time," Vivian snapped. "The board meets in 6 weeks, and you're still unmarried. If you don't make the announcement by your birthday, you lose your seat, and everything your father built goes to the vultures." "I'd rather lose the company than trap myself in another loveless arrangement," he replied quietly. Cassandra stiffened beside him. "So that's what this is?" she said, voice trembling with controlled rage. "You're throwing away everything for a woman who dusts your shelves?" Elena turned to leave, humiliated, but Damien caught her hand. "Don't." She shook her head. "I don't belong in this world, Damien, and you don't belong in mine." He let her go. Later that night, alone in her room, Elena found a note slipped under her door. The handwriting was delicate but rushed. No signature. "You were never meant to be part of this story. Leave before it writes you out permanently." The morning after the masquerade, the estate was quieter than usual, but Elena's mind was anything but still. She hadn't slept. Not really. The memory of Damien's touch, the way his voice softened when he asked her not to leave, and Cassandra's cutting words replayed in her mind like an echo she couldn't escape. That note, the one slipped under her door, still sat folded in her pocket. She couldn't shake the feeling that something larger was unfolding around her, something that had started long before she arrived. Elena found Mrs. Holloway in the kitchen, slicing fruit with the same precision she used for managing the entire household. "I need to talk to you," Elena said quietly. The older woman looked up, her eyes calm and unreadable. "Walk with me," she replied, wiping her hands on a towel. They took the path along the edge of the estate, just beyond the garden walls. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "Eliza didn't fall," Elena said finally. "Did she?" Mrs. Holloway's hands froze where they rested over each other. "No one can say for sure," she said carefully. "But I know what fear looks like, and she was afraid in the weeks before she died." Of what? Of being trapped in a life that wasn't hers, of secrets she couldn't unsee. Elena's breath caught. "And Damien?" "He was grieving long before she died," the woman said softly. "The moment he realized she had married his name, not his heart, something in him broke." They rounded the path, arriving at the greenhouse. Inside, sunlight spilled through the glass, illuminating lush plants and earthy aromas. Mrs. Holloway knelt and reached beneath a loose wooden panel. From the hollow underneath, she retrieved a worn leather folder and handed it to Elena. "She left this," she said. "Hidden. I've kept it all this time. I think Eliza wanted someone to find it, someone who might actually do something with it." Elena sat on the stone bench and opened it carefully. Inside were letters, dozens of them, some addressed to Damien, others to a woman named Valerie she assumed was a friend. Each one spoke of feeling watched, of a presence in the house that made her skin crawl. In one, Eliza wrote, "Vivian has eyes everywhere. I can't even cry without thinking she'll hear it echo through the walls." There were also legal papers, ones outlining a clause in the Blackwell family trust. Elena scanned the bolded section, heart racing. If the heir to Blackwell Holdings is unmarried by his 45th birthday, control of the estate shall transfer to the board of directors unless vetoed by a majority shareholder with cause. The clause hadn't even taken effect yet. Damien was only 42. She looked up, breathless. "Vivian's been using this clause as a weapon, but it's not even enforceable yet." "Correct," Mrs. Holloway said. "And that's not the only thing she's kept hidden." Later that afternoon, Elena stood in the shadowed corner of the Blackwell Holdings lobby downtown, dressed in the plain gray blazer she used for interviews, clutching the folder against her chest like armor. She had tried to call Damien but got no answer. Vivian had scheduled a surprise emergency board meeting. She'd learned that much from one of the drivers. She wasn't alone for long. A tall man in a navy suit approached her with a curious look. He looked vaguely familiar, same striking features as Damien, though with an easier smile and mischief in his eyes. "You must be Elena Moore," he said. "I'm Nicholas Blackwell, Damien's older brother, or younger, depending on the hour." "I thought you were in Italy," Elena blurted. "I was," he said with a shrug. "Mother summoned me with all the subtlety of a storm. I figured something interesting was going on." She handed him the folder. "You should read this." Minutes later, Nicholas burst into the conference room mid-meeting. Elena followed behind him, her heart in her throat. Damien's eyes widened when he saw her. "Miss Moore has something the board should hear," Nicholas said smoothly. "Absolutely not," Vivian snapped. "Yes," Damien countered, standing. "Let her speak." And Elena did. She told them everything. About the clause's true terms, about the emotional blackmail, about the fear Eliza had lived with. She handed them Eliza's letters and the documents. By the time she finished, the room was silent. Finally, an older man on the board stood. "I move that we dismiss any motion to remove Mr. Blackwell as CEO." "Seconded," another voice said. Vivian's face went cold as marble, but she said nothing. Damien crossed the room to Elena, pulling her gently aside. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," she whispered. "For you. For her." He leaned in, brushing her cheek with the back of his hand. "Then let me ask you one more thing." But before he could finish, the door burst open again. Cassandra stood there, breathless. "I'm not done either." 3 months later, the Blackwell estate looked entirely different under the glow of a golden October afternoon. The gardens, once meticulously trimmed and quietly somber, now bloomed with vibrant color, dahlias, chrysanthemums, and roses still holding on to their last burst of life before winter. Laughter floated through the air as guests began to gather on the lawn. Waiters in black and white uniforms glided between small groups, offering champagne and miniature canapés. In the center of it all, near the lake where swans glided gracefully, a white tent had been set up, strung with lights and decorated with subtle touches of autumn. Elena stood inside the gazebo near the orchard, adjusting the sleeves of her cream-colored dress with trembling fingers. It wasn't a wedding, but it felt like one. Her hair was curled softly and pinned back with a gold comb Mrs. Holloway had gifted her before retiring last month. Sophie had been fussing over her for the last 20 minutes, and now she stepped back, arms crossed with a satisfied smile. "You look incredible." "Nervous?" Elena nodded, biting her lower lip. "You'd think after standing up to Vivian Blackwell and half the Boston elite, I'd be immune by now." Sophie grinned. "This is different. This is personal." They both looked toward the house, where guests mingled on the front steps and in the garden. Today was Damien's 43rd birthday, but they'd chosen this moment for something more. A quiet announcement. No press, no headlines. Just the people who mattered. The sound of footsteps on the gazebo stairs made them both turn. Damien stood there, tall and striking in a dark gray suit that hugged his frame like it had been made just for him, which it probably had. His eyes lit up when he saw Elena, and for a moment, the rest of the world seemed to fade away. "I know it's bad luck to see the bride before the ceremony," he said with a boyish grin, "but since this isn't technically a wedding, I figured I'd risk it." Sophie rolled her eyes. "I'll leave you two lovebirds alone, but don't take too long. The champagne's starting to run low, and the rich people are getting restless." As she disappeared down the path, Damien stepped forward and took Elena's hands in his. Having second thoughts, she shook her head. "Just trying to believe it's all real. That this, us, isn't going to disappear like a dream." He brushed his thumb over the back of her hand. "If it's a dream, then I hope we never wake up." Since the board meeting, everything had shifted. Vivian had withdrawn from company affairs, retreating to her city apartment with only rare formal visits to the estate. Cassandra had quietly stepped away after the confrontation, her pride stung, but her posture graceful. Nicholas had stayed longer than expected, helping Damien restructure the business and now splitting his time between Boston and London. Mrs. Holloway had indeed retired, leaving Elena officially in charge of the estate's day-to-day operations. Not as a housekeeper, but as director of hospitality and preservation, a role Damien had created just for her. Elena looked toward the house, then back at him. "Your mother is here, you know. I saw her car. I wasn't sure she'd come. She told me she wouldn't miss her son's birthday, no matter how foolish she thinks his choices are." He chuckled. "That sounds about right." "She also said," Elena added softly, "that she hadn't seen you this happy since before your father died. I think it was her way of saying she approves, or at least she's trying. That's all I need." They walked hand in hand across the grass toward the gathering crowd. Murmurs rose and faces turned, as Damien stepped up onto the small wooden platform set up beside the lake. Elena stood beside him, her heart beating so loud she was sure the birds could hear it. Damien cleared his throat, and the quiet grew. "Thank you all for being here," he began. "Today isn't just my birthday, it's a new beginning. For the past few years, I've been walking through life half asleep, haunted by the past and cornered by expectations. But then, someone knocked on my front door, and everything changed." He turned to Elena, his gaze steady and warm. "She didn't come looking for me. She came looking for a job. She brought with her not just competence, but courage, compassion, and a kind of honesty I didn't know I'd been missing. So today, I want to share something with you all. Not a business deal, not a headline, just a simple truth." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring, elegant and understated. "I asked her to marry me, and she said yes." Applause broke out, soft and genuine. Elena blinked back tears as he slipped the ring onto her finger. They kissed under the golden light, with the lake behind them and the future wide open ahead. And as they stood there, Elena realized that the life she had once only dreamed of hadn't arrived with wealth or power, but with a man who saw her for exactly who she was, and loved her all the more for it. Sometimes life doesn't follow the path we plan. It leads us through unexpected doors, to people and places we never imagined. Elena Moore went to the Blackwell estate looking for a job, not love. She expected to scrub floors, not to uncover secrets or spark a change in the heart of a man burdened by legacy. but through her honesty, compassion, and quiet strength, she reminded Damien Blackwell of what truly mattered. Not money, not appearances, but connection, truth, and choice. This story teaches us that where you come from doesn't define where you're going. That love built on sincerity will always outshine love born of convenience. It's about having the courage to step into the unknown, to fight for what's right even when the odds are stacked against you, and to trust that sometimes the most beautiful things in life are the ones you never saw coming. Whether you're Elena, trying to hold your world together, or Damien, rediscovering what it means to live fully, remember, happiness isn't handed to you. It's something you choose, moment by moment, day by day, with heart, with bravery, and with hope. Where are you watching from today? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss another unforgettable story. More tales of love, courage, and second chances are just around the corner.